Hello, this is Sharon Wild from Pickle Hub, bringing you information about upcoming tournaments. In this segment, we're going to talk about tournament logistics. This information is for Pickle Hub Squad members. First, we're going to talk about the venues. So the upcoming tournaments in February and March are all at outdoor tennis centres. So we're going to be outside in the sun, playing on a hard court tennis surface. At Eronda, we have the benefit of being undercover with a roof. At these venues that we're playing the tournaments at, we're going to be under the sun. So we need to be prepared for that. Some of the things that you can consider, we do encourage players from our Pickle Hub squad to be wearing the Pickle Hub shirts. You can get a personalised shirt with your name on it. Also, you might consider getting some long arm sleeves that you wear under that shirt. There are types of sleeves that you can wear that just along your arms. You can talk to Andrew, myself. You may see us wearing some of those. The ones that I personally wear are called SP arms, SPARMs. It stands for Sun Protection Arms. So those are long coverings along our arms that can help with sun protection, keeping the sun off us, but they also help in cooling us down. So as we sweat, that sweat on these SPARMs actually helps to cool us down and make us feel a little bit cooler, which of course is really helpful on a hot sunny day. Of course, you would look to have a hat, sunglasses, preferably safety glasses as well if that's possible, but at least sunglasses. You'll want sunscreen, a towel to be able to wipe, to clean your sunglasses and to be able to wipe any sweat off as needed. You may also consider wearing compression socks. Most of you will have seen that Andrew and I wear compression socks. They can be very helpful for general gameplay, also helpful for anyone who has any calf issues, any Achilles issues, any foot in general issues. They can help to support those and help you to prevent any issues in those areas. Of course, it may not prevent an injury, but it may help to support you in those areas. And Andrew and I personally choose to wear those for all sessions. You can have the compression socks. They're actually sports socks. They're not like the travel compression socks. With those socks, you can have a full one that goes from the sock all the way up to under the knee, or you can get what's called calf sleeves. So they're basically run from the ankle up to under the knee, so they're not actually along the foot section. Or you can get the actual compression socks that are just for the foot that's end at the ankle, whichever one you like. You'll find those online at various outlets. Of course, if you normally wear a knee brace or anything like that, you'd want to have that available as well. Now, in terms of food, again, we're going to be out in the sun, so it's important that you bring lots of water with you. Ideally, you'd have multiple water bottles. Most of the venues do have a water refill station, but it may not be handy when you need it. You may have to run across the venue and may not have time to do that when you need it. So we do suggest that you have a large amount of water that you actually take with you rather than relying all of the time on having to refill your water. Electrolytes also are really important. A lot of players actually need those to keep going because you will be sweating a lot through a tournament, so you want to be replacing with electrolytes or some types of salts or things like that, whatever it is that you like to use. Some people also use a magnesium cream or spray. We've observed a lot of people often get cramps when they're playing in tournaments because of the outdoor weather conditions, and also playing in a lot of games, they can often get calf cramps are quite common. So to help with those, magnesium creams or magnesium spray can come in really handy, or magnesium, there's some roll-ons available. If you haven't used one of those before, if you have a spray, I just suggest trying it out at home before the tournament, because some people find it gets a little bit itchy and irritating. You don't want to be itchy and irritated on the court if you're using it for the first time. So just try that out yourself at home. Now, in terms of food, at the upcoming venues, depends on which tournament you're playing at. For the Beanley tournament, which is the Australian Masters, very limited food options on site. So there may or may not be food there. Previous tournaments, there hasn't been much food there. This one, I can't say whether there will or not, so I'm erring on the side of caution and assuming that there won't be much food available, so I'm taking my own food. For the Pimpama event, which is the QPT Gold Coast at Pimpamar. There is a cafe there inside the Aquatic Centre. There's a full cafe. Do keep in mind, if you do use those facilities, that it can take a bit of time for them to prepare meals. They're a little bit on the slower side. We've experienced when Andrew and I have been to tournaments there, so you don't want to be in a hurry. When you're waiting there, you need to have a bit of time allocated there. In terms of food at tournaments in general, personally, Andrew and I don't like to eat before we're playing in a tournament. So if we have an early start time, I'll talk about logistics of tournaments and session times shortly. But if you have an early start time, generally it's best just to eat breakfast and then go to the event and have snacks with you. I'll talk about snacks momentarily. But if you have a later start time, let's say if your start time was 10:30 or 11 or something like that, then you may look to actually eat lunch earlier in the day, perhaps before you leave for the venue, or bring some lunch with you, have it there a few hours before you're actually scheduled to play. That way your body has time to digest that food. Andrew and I personally find, and after speaking with a lot of other players who play in tournaments, that if we've had a meal just before, not long before we actually are scheduled to play in a tournament, that often our body is too busy trying to digest that food. Makes it a little bit hard to perform at our best if we have a full tummy. So basically, best to eat earlier, a few hours before, or just wait until after, have some snacks and then wait until after you've finished playing for the day, and then go and have some lunch then. Okay, so snacks. I suggest you bring snacks with you. Again, different venues. Some venues have food available, some don't. Just on that food as well, I haven't mentioned the March event, which is at Redcliffe. At Redcliffe, they do have food available. So they have various types of food. It's not a full cafe, but they have, usually when I go there, they have a sausage sizzle, for example, or different types of that sort of thing along those lines, different options there. So they do have some food available there. Now back to snacks. With snacks, bring them with you. The snacks, you want to be nice and readily available, something that you can nibble on before your sessions, and also potentially during your session play in between games. Bananas are always a popular option for a lot of people. You may have different types of lollies like Snapes or something like that. You may have some fruit, whether it's sliced fruit or it's eaten an apple or whatever it is. So fruit, bringing pre-prepared juice is also a great option. So often Andrew and I will take fruit, and Andrew will have bananas, and we will have juice that we take, pre-prepared juice that we take along with us. So make sure you have some snacks available, because you will need those throughout the day and in between your sessions. Now, going back to the venues themselves, at the Beenleigh and the Pimpamar venues, there's very limited seating available. So at Beenleigh, there's not much seating available for players, there's not much seating available for spectators, so we encourage you to bring along your own camping chair. If you have one, a foldable, collapsible camping chair, bring that along with you to use as needed. At the Pimpamar venue, for most of the courts, they don't have much seating for the players nor for the spectators. A few of the top courts, they do have a spectator area, but it's only for those particular courts. So I encourage you again, for the Pimpamar venue, to bring along your own seating, bring along a camp chair. For the Redcliffe venue, for the March tournament, they have plenty of seating there, so you won't need to bring a seat with you. They have a lot of spectator seating for all of their courts and seating for players, so you won't need to bring a chair to Redcliffe. Okay, let's move on to start times. The start time for your session will be announced approximately 2 days before your event. So 2 days before the event, you'll receive an email from the tournament director. It won't be from Andrew myself, that will come directly from the tournament director, to let you know the start time for your session for your division. So there'll be different start times for different divisions. Generally, for tournaments, most tournaments, the earliest start time is 8 o'clock for the actual gameplay to start, and then there'll be other sessions that start later. So some may be, for example, at 10:30 or 11 or later. So just keep an eye out for that email. Generally, it comes out 2 to 3 days before the actual event is happening. In that So when you see your start time, once you're aware of what that is, you're expected to check in for the tournament about at least 30 minutes before the start time. So let's say your start time was at 8 a.m. You would be expected to be at the venue and having checked yourself in. I'll talk about how you do that in a moment, at 7:30. So half an hour or more before your start time, you need to have checked yourself in. When you go to each of the venues, there will be a registration desk. So head on over to that registration desk as the first thing you do when you arrive. At the Beanley venue, generally the registration desk is on the higher level of the courts. There's a building on the left-hand side. The tennis courts are on the right-hand side. If you walk along, there are 4 tennis courts, and you'll see a little walkway that goes between them that has a undercover area over that walkway. Generally, the registration desk is in the middle of that walkway. So just have a look over there. You'll often see other players. There's a little desk set up with the registration helpers there. So head on over to that registration desk, let them know your name, and they will confirm what division you are playing in. Then at the start time that it's announced, if everything is running on time, which hopefully it will be, you will hear hopefully a loudspeaker. Most venues, they have a loudspeaker with a microphone system set up that will announce saying that your briefing is about to start. So they may say the division for the 65-year-old men's division, whichever the division is, and the 35-year-olds or whatever it is division is, their sessions are about to commence. We're going to have our player briefing. So head on over to the briefing area. Often it is near where the registration desk is, or they'll tell you where else it is if it's not near the registration desk. Those people there will then tell you a bit of information about your upcoming session. They will tell you which courts you'll be playing on. So they'll say, for example, the 65-year-old men's doubles, whatever the division category is, will be playing on courts 5, 7 and 8 as an example. So then you would head on over to those courts, and then they'll say what the other divisions are that are also starting. Keep in mind that the sessions don't always run on time. So the first session generally will start on time, but then nature of side-out scoring, games can run a bit longer than anticipated, so it can push out the schedule for the other start time. So you just have to be available at the start time that they have told you in your email, but just keep in mind it may not actually start at that time, but you are expected to be there and available if they do actually start on time. Otherwise, you just have to hang out there until they make the announcement of when your session will be started. Also, keep in mind that at the venues that we'll be playing at for these upcoming tournaments in February and March, they will be using, when they make the announcements about court numbers, they're referring to the pickleball court numbers, which are different to the tennis court numbers. Because we're at a tennis venue, up on the fences you will see the tennis court numbers. So it might say court 1, court 2, court 3, court 4, for example, but inside that there's generally going to be 4 courts per tennis court. So what you're looking for is the pickleball court number, not the tennis court number. So ignore the numbers up on the tennis fence. You want to look inside the tennis courts. On each net will have a number on the net to let you know which pickleball court each one is. So you're looking for the pickleball court numbers on the pickleball nets. We've had a few players caught out before. When they hear court 3, they'll head over, look at the tennis court number and head over to tennis court 3, but it's actually pickleball court number 3 that they're supposed to be on. So just keep that in mind. So let's say that you've arrived at the venue, you have registered, then you want to basically see if your partner is there. I suggest that you exchange phone numbers with your playing partner so that you can touch base when you arrive, or send them a message, ask them how far away they are so you know what their status is. Then once you find them at the venue, if there are courts available to warm up on, by all means you can go and warm up. Depends on how much time you have until your session is due to start. If you are playing in the first session of the day, generally you will have a court to warm up on because there won't be any games being played at that time. So courts will be available to warm up on. But if you have one of the later start times, let's say your start time was 10:30 or 11 as an example, generally there are going to be other games or other divisions already happening on all of the courts, so there generally won't be any warm-up courts available. So it's not always the best scenario, but it happens in all tournaments. For the later start times, generally you won't have courts available. So if you do see a free court, please don't jump onto it and think that you've won the lotto by getting a free court to warm up on. Generally there is still gameplay happening for other divisions at that time, so you need to wait for the announcement if you have a later start time as to which courts you can head on over that will be free for warming up on. So if you do have that initial start time, the first session of the first division of the day, by all means go and start warming up with your partner. I'll talk about warm-up strategy in a moment. If you have a later start time, then generally you'll actually only have 2 minutes to warm up before a game. I know it's not much, but that is the actual guidelines in tournament rules, is that a team have 2 minutes to warm up. So just keep that in mind. You want to make the best use of that warm-up time. Next, we're going to talk about the merging of categories. If there is a division in which there are less than 4 teams, then what they'll often do is merge that division with another division. It may be merged with a division of the same skill level, or it may be merged with a division of the same age range. So it could go either way, just depends upon the tournament entry. So just be aware that whichever division you actually registered for, or you intended to register for after all of your requested changes have been made, that may actually move and be merged with another division based upon the number of entries that have been made in that particular tournament. Next, we're going to talk about the number of points in each game that you'll be playing to, and then we'll talk about the score sheets that are used and how to use them. So with the number of points for a game, we're playing side-out scoring in these upcoming tournaments. Depends upon how many teams are in the pool that you're in. So generally, if your pool has 5 teams or less, then you'll be playing to 15 points, win by 2. If you have more teams than that in your pool, generally is played to 11 points, but that is up to win by 2. That is up to confirmation on the day. So when you have your briefing with the tournament director before your session starts, they will let you know which courts you're on. They'll also let you know the number of points that are going to be played for your division and for your pool. There may actually be different number of points in different pools, so you want to hear what it is for your division, but also keep in mind that on the score sheet it will let you know how many points that game is to be played to. Always check on that score sheet to make sure that you are playing to the correct number of points, to make sure if it's 15 or 11 points that you're supposed to be playing to. If players make an error on that, unfortunately there's nothing that the tournament can do about it. You just have to actually look at your score sheets and listen to the tournament director when they give their briefing. If you make it through to semi-finals and medal matches, semi-finals, depending upon how much time is available left in that day, semi-finals may either be 1 game to 15, or they may be the best of 3 games played to 11. So you have to win 2 games, the best of 3. You'd have to win 2 games out of the 3. In medal matches, they will be games played the best out of 3. So you have to win 2 games out of the 3. If the third game isn't needed, so if a team won 2 games in a row, they don't play that third game. When there are the 3 games that are played, they play them to 11, win by 2. Next, score sheets. At the start of your game, you'll be able to look at a score sheet. You want to check your score sheet before you go into the court to make sure that you're on the correct court and to make sure that you are playing the correct team that you should be playing against. Sometimes they will need to change the court that you're on just based upon availability. So it may say you're supposed to be playing on court 5, but court 5 is currently got another game on it, but court 6 next to it is available. So if that court is also for your division, then the court captain may actually allocate you to a different court. But the most important thing is that you're playing the correct team. So once you do that, look at your score sheet. It will have the names pre-written of your team, and it will have the names of your opponents also pre-written. It will tell you how many points you are to play to for that game. At the end of your game, the winning team are responsible for filling in that score sheet. So generally the score sheet is on a little clipboard, and there'll be the pile of score sheets for your division all together on that clipboard with a pen. The winning team, the team captain, so out of the two players you nominate a team captain. That team captain will fill in the score sheet. On the score sheet, the only thing that person needs to do is they need to write the score on the score sheet. So you need to have the score next to the appropriate name of the teams. You also need to be circling the winning team. So that's really important, that you put a big circle around the names of the team that won. That's the way that the tournament director knows who won that game. Then each captain from both teams, the team captain from the two teams that played, need to initial that score sheet. If you're the winning team, you need to make sure that the correct names are on there. So make sure that your names for you and your partner are on there. Make sure that the people that you actually played, that their names are on there before you initial that score sheet. I have actually been caught out with that at a tournament once. I was handed a score sheet to fill in for a game. My team won that, so we filled out the score sheet. We saw our names. We assumed that the other names on that sheet were the team that we just played. We put the score on, initialed it, handed that in to the tournament director. A few games later, we realised we'd actually filled in the incorrect score sheet. So we had to go back and unravel that, and it was a big mess. So make sure that when you're signing a score sheet, you double check with your opponents to make sure that because it's going to be last names on there, not first names, your last names, your opponent's last names for that game that you just played. Once you fill in the score sheet, it's the responsibility of the winning team to hand that score sheet into the registration desk. You need to do that immediately after your game. You can't wait, play another game, and then hand in the score sheet. It has to be handed in immediately after your game. That way the tournament directors can be entering that score into their computer system. Really important that you do that. Sometimes it's a bit frustrating. If you've just played a long game, you have to run over, hand the score sheet in, come back and play another game, but that's just the way it is. So please make sure that you hand in those score sheets efficiently. In a tournament, you may have what's called a court captain. That is generally one of the players who are in that division, or it may be a volunteer who is helping out. That person is responsible for trying to make sure that the games are run efficiently. So they'll take the score sheets, all of the score sheets, and look at who should be playing on which courts. If a court becomes available because the game is finished, they will look to see who can jump onto that court next. Generally, they do it in sequence, but sometimes one game will run longer than another game, so they may skip through and jump a few games ahead based upon the teams that are available. So listen to your court captain. Most of the time, the court captain has played in tournaments before, so they will have a bit of experience, or the volunteer has experience. If there isn't a court captain, you need to work through that with the other teams there to try and have things run as efficiently as possible for your division. Now let's talk about timeouts. In a tournament, in a game that's either played to 11 or a game that's played to 15, your team gets 2 timeouts. So that's 2 timeouts for your team, 2 timeouts for your opponents. You don't have to use those timeouts, but I do encourage you to use them. Now, timeouts, in the rules, it says that timeouts are 1 minute for a timeout. To call a timeout, you actually signal to your opponent. So you can do a little T signal, or you can just say audibly that you want a timeout. You have to call that timeout before, if your opponents are about to serve, you need to call the timeout before they get in the position and go to call out the store to serve. So you can't call a timeout after a player has started to call the store and are about to serve. You need to do it beforehand. Now, from memory, when I played tournaments, I thought that the timeout was actually 2 minutes. I may be just not remembering that correctly. In the rules, it actually says 1 minute, but I seem to remember it certainly felt like 2 minutes. But either way, it's going to be 1 or 2 minutes. And generally, in the tournament director briefing that they give before you start, they'll generally say, talk about the timeouts as well. Now, with timeouts, also when you have a change of ends, you also get the opportunity to basically, it's not a full timeout, but you have 1 minute in which you have to change ends. So in that, I basically use that change of ends as a mini timeout as well. So you can go and grab a quick drink, or you can use that to clean your glasses or towel yourself off, get rid of a bit of a sweat or whatever it is that you're looking to do. So you have 1 minute between the time that the point was won or lost that caused the end change until you need to be in position ready to resume the game at the other end. Now, with your timeouts, I encourage you to use them strategically. So with a timeout, most people think, well, you just use a timeout if you're feeling tired. Everyone's going to be feeling tired. So generally that's not the reason why I would use a timeout. I encourage you to use timeouts strategically, meaning you want to use it to break up the momentum of your opponents. So if your opponents have a little bit of a streak of points that they earn, so if they're the serving team and they've just won, say, 3 points in a row, and their score is ahead of yours. Now, if your score is ahead of your opponent's, then certainly don't need to have a timeout. But let's say that your opponent's score, they're ahead of you in the game, and they've just had a streak of about 3 or 4 points. It's best to try and stop their momentum, because what will actually happen if you call a timeout when your opponents are serving, when they're the serving team, it can often stop or interfere their momentum. You need to call the timeout, as I said before, your opponents are about to serve. So if I were on the serving team and our team was serving, I wouldn't be calling a timeout. I would only call it when my opponents are serving. And when you do that, I've observed that often if you call a timeout after your opponents have had a streak of a few points in a row, that they will make a serving error when they come back because they lose focus. So if they've just had a little streak, they might be feeling a little bit confident. They have their time out. They're feeling pretty good about themselves. They come back on. They've actually lost a little bit of focus. So I've observed quite frequently when a serving team comes back after a timeout, they'll often make an error and it will cause a side out, or at least it'll cause the serve to go to the second server if it was the first server who had been serving at the time. So it's a really good strategy to break up their momentum and potentially for you to get the serve back and have the opportunity to continue the game. So again, you get 2 timeouts. So you may call a timeout, and then a few minutes later, you may call a timeout again if you still have a timeout available. There's also a medical timeout that's available. Now, medical timeouts should only be used if there's a genuine medical issue. So let's say that a player had a calf strain that occurred, like they tear a muscle, they do have some type of injury that occurs during that game or that's happened during that tournament, then that may be a legitimate medical issue that you need to notify the head referee or the tournament director that there is a medical issue. They will come over and assess whether they think it's a genuine medical issue or not, or if the team's just trying to buy some time. If they determine that it's a genuine medical issue, you have up to a 15-minute medical timeout option. That 15 minutes starts not at the time when the person says that they need the timeout for medical reasons. It starts from when the head referee or the tournament director actually arrives on your court. So potentially it's actually longer than 15 minutes. Once that 15 minutes is up, though, if the player can't resume play, they have to forfeit that game. Now, a question that I've had recently from players is about, can you leave the court to clean your glasses, grab your towel, wipe some sweat off, or have a little sip of water in between points? And the answer to that is yes, provided you don't abuse that and take advantage of your opponents and try and do it all the time. There is a rule that says, it's called continuous play. So the idea is that you can, as long as you let your opponents know before the next serve has occurred, so you can't do it after a score has been called and the players are about to serve. So as long as you do it at the conclusion of a point or a conclusion of a rally, you let your opponents know that you just need to clean your glasses, you need to wipe the sweat off with a towel, you want to have a quick sip of water, very quick one, then by all means go ahead and do that, as long as you let your opponents know. But you don't want to be doing that every other point, because your opponents will then get very annoyed with you. So just do that only when needed. You don't want to be using that as a mini form of timeout. But certainly some of us get sweatier than others. You do have that ability to do that. Next, we're talking about the warm-up. Now, the warm-up, as I mentioned, may only be 2 minutes. Sometimes you might be able to stretch it out a little bit. It might be 3 minutes, but there will generally be someone there trying to prompt you along and get you to actually start a game. So let's talk about the basis of a 2-minute warm-up. So when you're warming up, there's a few things that you're looking to do. I'll run through an actual suggested warm-up process that you have, but the warm-up isn't just about physically preparing your body and getting your body ready. There are other things that you're actually doing during the warm-up as well. During a warm-up, you're wanting to assess the weather conditions as of that very moment when you're warming up. So you may have already looked at the weather conditions earlier in the day, but you want to look at it right in that moment. So we're looking at the wind. We can't see the wind, but we're gauging and assessing the wind. Is there any wind? Is there a breeze, or is it very still? Which direction is the wind coming in? Is it swirling around? Is it going directly up from the baseline to baseline? Is it coming across from sideline to sideline? Is it on a diagonal? Whatever. Assessing the wind, because it will have a factor in your game. You're also wanting to look at where the sun is. So in outdoor tournaments during the day, the sun is going to be in the sky. Sometimes when you look at the sun, it might be right in your eyesight when you're looking up into the sky to hit a lob or a smash. Other times it might be directly over your head. So you want to assess where the sun is whilst you're doing your warm-up. The other thing that you're doing during your warm-up is assessing your opponents. So I will be doing my warm-up, I'll be assessing the weather, and I'll also be watching. So I've got one eye on my partner doing the warm-up, I've got my other eye looking at what my opponents are doing. So I want to assess my opponents to see if I can identify any strengths or weaknesses, because generally we won't have seen our opponents before. Most of the time we don't have the benefit of having seen our opponents play before. It'll be the first time we've seen them when they walk onto the court. So have a look, see what types of shots they're doing in their warm-up. If you see the person hitting the ball really hard in their warm-up, you go, okay, I know this person likes to hit the ball hard. Start thinking about strategies you can use to try to defend that and work and trying to shut that down. You may see that the person is doing dinks really well in their warm-up, so just be aware of that. Doesn't mean you don't want to dink, but just be aware of that. So you want to be assessing your opponent's strengths and weaknesses rather than waiting halfway in the game to try and work that out. You want to try and gauge as much as you can in that warm-up. Now, players, if there's particular shots that they don't like doing, generally they will avoid doing those in their warm-up and just focus on the shots that they do like. So that's also can be an indication as well. Now, as for your physical warm-up, in a 2-minute period, I encourage you to have a little dinking rally with your partner. Preferably you would do it cross court, but generally in a tournament you don't have that opportunity. You will have to do it directly, have your partner in front of you and be dinking across directly in front of you. So have your little dink-in warm-up for, say, about 30 seconds. Then I'd encourage you to have one of your players move back and practice some drop shots, just so you get a feel for how the wind is playing and get used to doing your drop shots. Then so if you were going back and had done some drop shots, then move forward up to the kitchen line and have your partner move back and have them practice a few drop shots. So you might do that for about a minute. And then if you only have the 2 minutes, practice a few serves. So you want to do serves, at least about 2 serves in each direction. So you want to be serving from the left side of the court into the right diagonal side, and then switch over and have a couple of serves the other way. To do that serving practice, you will need to speak to your opponents just to make sure, say you want to do a couple of serves to warm up, and then ask them if you can move on to the other side of the court so that you can serve diagonally that way. Most of the time they will be obliging because they generally also want to have a couple of serves to practice. The reason why we want to practice a few serves, again, we're just trying to warm our body up. We're also trying to assess what the wind is doing. So is the wind pushing your serves long, for example, or are you having to hit the ball into the wind, which is mean that the serves are going to be falling a bit shorter if you're having to hit into the wind. If you're lucky enough to be able to warm up for a bit longer, you might look to do some driving and volleying drill. So you might have one person standing back driving the ball to their partner who's standing on the kitchen line. Partner then volleys the ball back deep into the court so the other person can drive, and then drive the ball back and then swap roles. So the person who had been driving would move up to the kitchen line. They would be the person volleying, and their partner goes back and then becomes the person driving the ball. That's only if you have enough time available to include that in your warm-up. Once you've done your warm-up, you'll look to do a coin toss. Now, you can actually do this before you warm up if you like. So for the coin toss, that's to decide who is going to serve, who is going to receive, and which end. So with each court, at the base of the net, you'll generally have a little basket. Inside that basket will be a coin. Hopefully there should be a coin in there, and there will be some balls for your court. So grab that coin out. If there's not a coin there, you can use another method. If you have a referee for a medal match, they may write a number on a little piece of paper. They might write a number 1 or number 2 and ask a person to guess one of those 2 numbers to see who wins the equivalent of the toss. Otherwise, if you don't have a coin or a referee for your match, then you look for another method. A common method in a pickleball game is to have a person's paddle and look for a distinguishing mark on the base end of the paddle. So on a 6-0 paddle, for example, it will have a 6 for the 6-0, so you can put your hand over that base of the paddle, rotate the paddle around and ask your opponent to call out a 6 or a 9. Of course, a 6 is the 6 in one direction, the 9 is when it's upside down, and then whatever they call, if the paddle is in that direction, when you stop rotating it, take your hand off the end, then that person gets to decide. Now, if you win the coin toss, whether it's actually a coin itself or one of those other methods, you have 3 choices. You can either choose to serve, you can choose to receive, or you can choose the end. If you're the team that doesn't win the toss, you get the other options that are left. So let's say the team who win the coin toss decide to choose the end. I'll come back to that in a moment. Then the other team get to choose if they wish to serve or receive. Now, if you do win or let's say if the team who won the coin toss choose to serve or receive, you have the option of either choosing the end or the other option that's left. So you have those 3 options to choose from. Now, the strategy that we recommend if you do win the toss or have the opportunity to choose the end is to choose the end. The reason for that is there can be a big advantage in having a particular end of the court to start your game. So that's in your warm-up. I talked about assessing the weather conditions, the current weather conditions, not the weather conditions half an hour ago or 3 hours ago, the current weather conditions in that game. So look to see whether the sun is. If the sun is on an angle that if you look up into the sky to hit a lob or a smash and you're looking straight into the sun, that can be extremely distracting. So you want your opponents to be looking into that sun at the start of that game. Yes, later in the game you'll also have to do that, but you want to put them on the back foot by making them look into the sun at the start of the game. The other thing you want to look at or consider is the direction of the wind. If there is wind, often in outdoor tournaments there will be wind involved. Some days it can be extremely strong wind, other days it's very light wind, varies every day. If there is a noticeable wind and the wind is moving up along the court, so from baseline to baseline direction, not across the court from side of the net to the other side of the net. If it's moving from baseline to baseline direction, you want to choose the end where the wind is behind you. The reason for that is when the wind is behind you, it makes your shots go further. So often a team's shots will go longer than they intended them to because the wind gets behind it and pushes them longer. But because you've chosen that end, you are aware of that, your team is aware of that, and you can try to adjust your shots accordingly. So you don't hit them quite as far as you normally would because you know that the wind is going to carry them. Because you are aware of that, your opponents at the other end are going to be hitting into the wind. They're going to be used to that and used to that condition. When you change ends, that team is then going to be hitting with the wind behind them, but they're used to hitting into the wind. So it will often take them 2 or 3 points to adjust their shots to work with the wind. Meanwhile, you may have earned either those 2 or 3 points, or you may have won those 2 or 3 rallies to progress you in the game. So it's a big advantage in having the wind behind you and being aware of that at the start of the game and making your partners have to catch up and work that out partway through the game. So if you do get the option to choose an end, do so, have the wind behind you, or consider where the sun is up in the sky. Now, if you don't have that option and you only have the option of choosing to serve or receive, we encourage you to choose the receiving option. A lot of people think that if they have a strong serve, they're confident servers, that they want to serve first. There's a big advantage in receiving first. Always an advantage for the receiving team in general in pickleball, but more importantly in this circumstance at the start of a game, in any game, but particularly in a tournament situation, the first person who serves, so it's going to be the second server is what it's called in the start of a side-out game. They are often quite nervous and they will often make a serving error on the first serve of the game. If they do that, as soon as the serving team make an error in that first rally, that's a side out. The receiving team then become the serving team. The team who were the receiving team at the start then have 2 servers who have the opportunity to start adding points to the board. So there's a big advantage because it happens a lot that even if the person normally has a decent serve, that first serve of the game, they're often a little bit nervous and often make a serving error. So I encourage you to be the receiving team if you get that option. That way your team has 2 servers who have the opportunity to be adding to your team's score. A couple of other little tips for tournaments. At the base of each net in a tournament, there generally will be a little basket that has balls in. They are the balls to be used for your court. When obviously a few balls will be in there because both teams will need a ball to warm up, but generally there's not many balls in there, and it's considered basically an unspoken rule or etiquette, if you like, that the same ball is going to be used for the entire game whenever possible. So unless the ball actually becomes damaged or cracked, you use the same ball. So when we're playing at Pickle Hub, for efficiency, if a ball gets hit a long way away, rather than chasing it and wasting time to bring it back, we just grab another ball. We can't do that in tournaments. Andrew and I actually played in our very first tournament we played in. we had a ball that was hit long, was hit several courts, ended up landing, stopping several courts away. We went and collected another ball out of the basket for our court. Our opponents actually refused to continue with play until we fetched the ball that we'd started the game with, because they wanted to use that same ball. So some of the reasons for that might be that you know the condition of that ball. If it's a new ball, if it's a used ball, you've inspected the ball, so you know that it's okay, it doesn't have any cracks in it. Whereas if a new ball is used, then you haven't had the opportunity to inspect that ball yet. Players also get used to a particular ball. So whenever possible, try and use the same ball rather than just grabbing another ball and continuing. If a ball does become cracked, then technically you can't actually replay the rally. Sometimes I might ask if that happens and it's clearly affected the outcome of a rally, then I will still ask my opponent, say, look, the ball is cracked, can we replay that rally? And they may or may not agree. If they do agree, then obviously you can. If they don't, the rally stands, but then you would dispose of that ball and then grab another ball, show the new ball, or not be a new ball but an alternate ball to your opponent, so you all agree that you're satisfied with that alternate ball, and then continue the game. Another thing that often happens in outdoor tournaments during the hotter months of the year is the balls become very soft. So you won't have experienced this at Pickle Hub because we have the overhead, we're undercover at Yeronga. But in outdoor tournaments in the middle part of the day, often the same balls are used over multiple divisions on the same court. So a ball may have been basically sunbaking out there for 3, 4, 5 or more hours. The longer that a ball sits out underneath the hot sun, it often becomes really soft. And if you pick the ball up, you can actually take your thumb and squish the ball, and it will squish very, very easily. It's not cracked, it just gets very squishy. When the balls are really squishy like that, they're pretty horrible to play with. They're really ordinary. They don't perform nearly as well as they normally would. So if you identify that one of the balls in your basket, or the ball that is being used for your game, is one of those, show it to your opponent and say, look, we don't think this is a suitable ball, it's gone soft because of the heat, and choose another ball. You don't actually have the ability to replay a point. If you discover that partway through a point, you have to let the rally stand, the outcome of that rally stand, but you might seek another ball for the subsequent rallies, so that you're not affected by those soft balls. Those balls don't need to be discarded because they will spring back to life once they cool down, but you don't want to be using one of those really soft squishy balls, preferably if you can avoid it. Okay, final thing we're going to talk about isn't a rule, it's just a little heads up about what can happen on a tournament day. Sometimes, unfortunately, or often, there's unfortunately delays. So you may be given a start time of 8 a.m. Often the start time at the start of the day, unless there has been a rain delay, will generally start on time. But any of the later starting times, so if your start time is 9:30, 10:30, 11, 12, whatever it may be, often the previous sessions go for longer than they've allocated for, and it pushes all of the other sessions back later. Also, of course, rain delays. If there is rain, they obviously can't play in the rain. They need to halt play, but they don't call the day off. They just halt play and hopefully wait for the rain to stop. And then for the courts, you have to wait for the courts to dry because we can't play on wet courts. So sometimes there may be rain delays of an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, which means that you may have played one game perhaps in your session. Rain comes through, you may have to wait for 3 or 4 hours before play recommences. Then it recommences as if nothing had happened. You just obviously delayed. If there is a rain delay, generally it's best to try and stay near the venue because you don't know when they're going to recommence play, and often the tournament director won't know themselves because weather can be fickle. So don't travel too far. You want to stay near the venue. If there has been a rain delay for a session before your start time, you're still expected to arrive at your start time, but then they will then inform you of when they estimate the approximate start or what the delay will be. So they may say, we're delayed by approximately 2 hours at the moment, 3 hours, half an hour, whatever it may be. So Andrew and I found ourselves in all of those scenarios in various tournaments. Generally, most days you'll generally get to actually complete your session on the same day, but unfortunately some tournaments, because of rain delays, actually push out the event to the following day. So in our first tournament, Andrew was playing in men's doubles. They played their pool play. They were then playing in they played their semi-final. They were playing in their bronze medal match. Andrew's in the bronze medal match. And they played it was best of 3 games. Andrew played the first game, and then it started to rain very heavily. Play was suspended. They waited for an hour or so. It was then becoming into the evening, and it was still raining, and they basically then had to reschedule the rest of that game and the rest of the other divisions that were also there until the following morning. So what that meant is the following morning they had to pick up that game from its second game onwards and complete that, and it pushed out all of the other sessions for the rest of that Sunday. So if you're playing on a Sunday in a 2-day tournament, just be aware that if there have been any major rain delays the previous day, it may affect your start time on the Sunday. If the tournament are aware of that on the Saturday evening, they will send a new email to you. It may be that evening, it may be very early in the morning on the Sunday. So just have a check of your emails early in the morning on a Sunday to see if your session time has been altered. Session times also can be altered basically at any time before the tournament actually starts as well. So just be mindful of that, to keep an eye on your emails, and because it may change from the original email that you get from the tournament director a few days before the event. Okay, hopefully that has helped to answer a lot of your questions, queries, and hopefully it will give you more confidence when you're playing in your tournament. Wish you all the best and look forward to seeing you there.